Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for joining us this evening. My name is Tanya Plibersek. I'm the federal member for the seat of Sydney, and I'm here with my colleague Verity Firth. Verity, of course, is running in the community pre-selection for the state seat, and she's one of two candidates running in that community pre-selection. Bill Shorten's been talking a lot about making the Labor Party larger and more democratic, more responsive to the people that we represent. And these community pre-selections really reflect that effort. What we're saying is that you don't have to be a member of the Labor Party to have a say about who the Labor candidate will be. If you follow politics closely, if you're interested in who your representative might be, you can have a say about who the Labor candidate will be in the next state election. Now, we've seen already about 3,500 community members vote, which is a terrific result. It means that people in our local area are really interested in having a say about who the Labor candidate should be for their state seat. I wanted to introduce you to Verity first of all. Many of you who are watching, I hazard a guess that all of you in fact know Verity and probably know her very well. She was the state candidate between the state member between 2007 and 2011, and against the trend at that time, she almost hung on to what has always been a very marginal seat. Verity lost by the narrowest of margins, but what you know from her vote was that the vote here in the lower house was much better than the vote in the New South Wales upper house for this same area. So Verity was a popular candidate who almost hung on against the trend. And when she left State Parliament in 2011, she went to work for the Public Education Foundation. Now, I know Verity, and I know some of the offers she had at the time. She wasn't short on offers that would have, I suppose, made her a buck in a post-political career. But what she chose to do was take her experience as Education Minister here in the state of New South Wales and the great reforms that she introduced and shepherded, and turn that to public advantage by working for a quite small, hope you forgive me Verity, quite small NGO that's concerned with making public education even better quality and more accessible for young people in New South Wales, and supporting teacher quality and all of the things that we know make a huge difference to New South Wales young people. I know that Verity had a huge number of great achievements during her time as the State Education Minister, but one of the things that impressed me most was the introduction of ethics classes in New South Wales public schools. That was a tough call. It was something that was opposed by a great number of people and organisations in New South Wales, but it's something that people have been fighting for a really long time, and it was Verity Firth as Education Minister who managed to deliver it. And of course, that brings us to our conversation topic tonight, ethics in politics. I was very pleased to be able to join Verity for this conversation tonight, because of course it is something that I've got strong views about. We've seen a lot of disappointing and distressing revelations recently, some in New South Wales, many in New South Wales, coming before ICAC, others right across Australia. And so it's an issue that has always been something that I've been interested in. I'm a great reader of Anthony Trollope, and he's got a character, the Duke of Omnium, that becomes the Prime Minister. And the Duke's son says to him that he wants to marry a girl, and the Duke doesn't approve, and he says, but Dad, why can't I marry her? There's no law that prevents us from being married. Mm. And the Prime Minister says to his son, if the only defence you've got is what you're doing is not illegal, then you have strayed so far from what honour and ethical behaviour would dictate of you. And I think that that's kind of the thing in politics as well. I mean, there's a very, very basic, flaw that no one should ever consider dropping below is something legal. You don't even have to ask that question, or you shouldn't even have to ask that question. there's a second level, I think, of questioning yourself, which is this within the rules and entitlements? It might not be illegal, but am I doing strictly what is expected of me? And again, that shouldn't even be a question. The question of ethics in politics is a much more complex one that involves each individual asking themselves, not is it legal, is it within rules, is it within entitlements, but am I delivering what my constituents require of me, and am I doing it in a way that that I could defend to myself in my own conscience, and I could defend publicly if I were asked about it. So I guess, Verity, I'm going to take the opportunity of asking the first question. We're already receiving questions online. People can send questions in or comments, leave questions or comments on the video stream. So if you haven't taken the opportunity to do that, please do that. But I'm going to ask the first question, Verity, which is, given we've seen a lot of very unfortunate episodes in New South Wales at the moment, both Labor Party and Liberal Party politicians up before ICAC. There's so many questions. Did you, when you were there in your 4 years of political life, how did you cope with that?
Well, firstly, I would say that, lucky me, I have never had a conversation with EOB in my entire life, including when I was a Member of Parliament and a Minister. He never ever approached me, and I now am incredibly pleased, but it's also, I think, because he knew that he couldn't control me, you know. And I think when we talk about some of the reforms that we're doing at the moment in the Labor Party around broadening our pre-selection processes, allowing the community more say in our pre-selection processes, I think one of the reasons why Eddie Obeid knew that he had no control over me is because he didn't. You know, I'd been pre-selected by a rank and file pre-selection of the branch members in my area. My legitimacy was absolutely about that vote. He had no control over me. The head office of the party had no control over me. And I felt that, and I think he felt that too. I can't describe how angry I am at those people, and I think that most members of the Labor Party would say exactly the same thing. In fact, you hear the rage in their voices. I think there'll be a lot of disappointment.
And to be fair, I think most members of the Liberal Party, most rank and file members of the Liberal Party would be enraged as well at what they're seeing their own parliamentarians,
especially when you think about it. When you think about it, the rank and file members of both Labor and Liberal Party who go out in the rain to hand out powder votes because they believe in what they do and they believe in the cause, and you've got these other people, literally, allegedly dipping their hand in the till, when politics is so important, when actually it does change lives, and attracting the right sorts of people to politics and making sure that the right sorts of people can flourish in that environment, because it is an environment that encourages ideas, because it is an environment that isn't just about conflict, that it isn't just about the seeking of power. I think those are also, I suppose, the circumstances that we need to try to create to get the right people into politics.
And one of the things, I guess, that some people would say is the more people you have democratically involved, the easier it is, if you've got large decision-making bodies, to make good decisions. There's also an argument about how much people should know, and the more informed voters are, the more informed participants are, generally the better decisions are made. But that really runs up against something else that parliamentarians face, which is cabinet confidentiality and caucus solidarity. How did you make decisions about caucus solidarity and cabinet confidentiality when you're a member of parliament?
And that is such a good question. It's probably the thing that you struggle with the most, I think, as an MP. I have always been of the belief that, that most people are good people in their hearts, and that with the right sorts of with enough information, people in the end do make the sorts of decisions that are about their community and about the broader interest. And I used to read with great interest a number of things that have happened over in America where they've given randomly selected people in the community a whole lot of information about the budget, and then they decide about their local area budget, and they make really good decisions for the long term of the area. And I really like that sort of participation.
It does usually involve people in a room for at least 2 days, though.
That's right. So and they do train them up.
Deliberative democracy, I think, is a terrific thing, but you've got to have people who are prepared to
be locked in a room.
Be locked in a room for a few days. Yeah.
But I'm very interested by all of that, and I think it's true. So I tend to naturally err on the side of more information is good, more information is better information. But it is true that when you're a minister and you're in a caucus, you also have, and when we're talking about ethics, you also have the ethical obligation to respect the processes. You know, that the cabinet confidentiality is also about proper process. It enables it enables the bureaucracy to give frank and fearless advice, that's actually based on evidence. It allows people to speak freely in cabinet and hopefully give frank and fearless opinion based on evidence of their department. So there is a real reason for that.
I'm going to push you a little bit and say, can you give us an example of that?
I can give an example. When I was in cabinet, there was a proposal to demolish the Glebe Island Bridge, which I really, really did not want to happen. It is, for those who live in Glebe, and in fact, most people would know it, it is a beautiful bridge. Old bridge, heritage protected, one of the last of those swing bridges that can move. Yes, it probably does need a bit of maintenance, but it is a beautiful example of that period, and we really don't want to see it demolished. But there was potential that it was going to be. In fact, it was being argued in a cabinet minute that this would happen. And I, behind the scenes, as part of the proper cabinet processes, was lobbying furiously, was going and talking to the department, getting the extra advice, and won the argument. So in the end, I actually won that argument in cabinet, and the bridge, people can see it today, was not demolished. And that was a difficult decision because I'd won, and probably there was a part of me that wanted to tell people of my victory, in saving the bridge. And there definitely would have been an electoral advantage in that. But I decided not to, that I did have, and, I suppose partly because I'd won that, I also felt that, the process had worked. In fact, the proper process had worked.
So you could stay inside the process. You didn't have to go outside. You weren't having to do something that was keeping the bastards honest because you
the process
legitimately won the process. Any other examples that you want to share?
I'm just wrecking my brain. I know an example. It wasn't a cabinet decision, but it was a decision where I decided to open the information up to the community, and it wasn't information I had to, but I felt it was ethical too. One of the things I've always thought, particularly in politics, but it's probably a good lesson for life as well, is that it's best to always be truthful with people. Like it's, especially, I would say especially in politics, there's no point saying to one community group, oh no, I totally support you, and then saying to another community group with the opposite opinion, oh no, I totally support you. It's not sustainable, but it's also not ethical. You should have, if you're going to be in public life, you should have not just the ethics, but the bravery to have your own opinion and to defend your own opinion and to explain always, I would argue, always politely and respectfully, but explain why it is you have that opinion. One of the biggest sort of controversies during my time as member was that the developers of the Tigers site, and they still keep doing it, but they wanted to build a very large development on that site, and they wanted a footbridge across. And in order to do the footbridge, they wanted to purchase Rozelle Public School land to do it, right? And because I was the Minister for Education, they came to me asking to purchase the land. Now, that wasn't a cabinet decision, but it was a decision presumably that I could have kept between, But I really decided in that instance that it did have to be made public. And it actually, more importantly, the school had to know. It really was. That was particularly when you're talking about school land. So I did. I took it to the PNC. I actually got I got the Tigers to talk to the PNC. We put them together to talk about it. They were prepared to offer money, and I said, you know, it's totally up to the school community, this one. And the school community decided that they didn't want to give away their land. Fair enough, absolutely their own call. And I was glad that I made that decision. I think that was the right decision to do, because that was land that, although it belonged to the state, actually, more importantly, belonged to that school community. Yeah.
Great answers. I see we've got quite a few questions coming in. So I'm going to ask, this is a question from Wendy, and it's actually to both of us. Verity and Tanya, who are people you respect for their ethical approach to politics, and why? Well, I've got to start with the obvious ones, Nelson Mandela and Daw Aung San Suu Kyi. And obviously, particularly with Nelson Mandela, and well, both of them really, what they represent in terms of democracy, forgiveness and democracy, but also personal sacrifice. So I think it's incredible to think how much each of them gave up to pursue what they knew was the right course of action. And I'm actually not now drawing a comparison between you and Nelson Mandela and Verity, but it does bring me to I don't want to be flippant about it, but it does bring me to another question. Politics is a fantastic career. It's incredibly intellectually stimulating. It's emotionally rewarding, but it takes a toll. And takes a toll on your family life. You've got 2 young children. You've got a job already doing something that is really valuable and important, and you know, fulfills part of that need at least to do something for your community. Why would you give up the time at home with your family on the weekends and weeknights and all of that stuff? But you can answer both questions. Who do you admire?
I was racking my brain.
Who do you admire, and why have you made the decision that you'd like to go back to the bear pit?
I can tell you why I've made the decision. And it was a difficult one, because I do have young children, and I have enjoyed the extra time that not being in politics has allowed me to spend with them. But the real reason was, part of my job at the Public Education Foundation was to help a whole range of stakeholders set up an alliance called the Need to Succeed Alliance, which still exists, so people should check it out.
Available in all bookstores.
But the Need to Succeed Alliance was a massive alliance, and we put it together of all the different major charities. You know, we had Smith Family, Brotherhood St Lawrence, Uniting Care, Anglicare. We had all the big education stakeholders. We had bipartisan support. You know, Catherine Greiner and Ken Boston were our spokespeople. Brilliant. And it felt fantastic, because we really knew we had the cream of sort of the education stakeholders and civil society all in the room, all supporting the Gonski reforms and needs-based funding. And then Christopher Pyne came along and just, in one day, smashed it. And whilst I don't think that's always the case, I don't think every government is quite as over the top in resisting of the vast opinion from all the education stakeholders, but he did. And it just made me realise that it did matter, you know. And for a lot of those actual service provision, like education, health, being in government matters, because the purse strings, you know, because funding matters, and you can win the debate in the community and you can still not get it up if you don't have
real
people.
Power.
So
who do you admire?
I admire you.
I was waiting for that one. Jeez.
I think it's
pinching you under the table. Come on.
I think it's important to be. I suppose I admire politicians. Well, I admire Gough Whitlam. You know, people who really, I suppose, because for me, behaving ethically in politics is also about, when you get there, seizing your opportunity to do something.
That's
you know,
not
just getting there and then deciding, oh, this is a good gig, I'm just going to cruise along. You know. And that's what's always wonderful about Gough Whitlam, is that he really decided, you know what, I'm here now and I'm going to make a difference. You know, and he literally did. And what I love about Gough Whitlam is that when you go to functions where he's at, there's always a queue of, you know, 20 people who literally all say the same thing, which is, I would never have gone to university if it wasn't for you, Gough. I would never have gone to university for it. So he's changed hundreds of thousands of people's lives and presumably the lives of their children.
It's absolutely right, Verity. Now, we've got another question here from Rosie, and she's asking, Verity, what's an example of a decision you've really struggled with, and how did you decide what to do? Now, you gave us the example of Roselle Public School earlier, but there's been examples where you've had to take a tough decision, budget cuts.
Yeah, it is hard.
Cabinet solidarity again.
Anything to do with anything to do with budget cuts are difficult because every, this will make people sigh, but every minister needs to deliver certain productivity savings. We have to keep within our budgets, and that often does mean really difficult decisions.
Even when your global spending's increasing all the time, you've got to make sure that every dollar's being spent the best way. Did you find any tough ones like that?
Yeah, I mean, any of the
or have you wiped them?
memory. I found the wage negotiations very difficult because I fundamentally believed that teachers should be paid more. At the core of me, I did, and for a whole range of reasons, including professionalisation of the fact that we want teaching to be a profession of status. We want people to be able to have over $100,000 when you're up at the really, advanced levels of teaching. And we just didn't have the budget to provide the sort of growth in those wages that I would actually think
that you wanted to.
Yeah, in a perfect world. I mean, I think it's what it has taught me, and as I've been thinking about whether or not, when I've been thinking about going back into politics, is it does teach you about why you also need revenue strategies as well. Yeah. You've got to think of ways, particularly for state governments, because we don't have the income tax power, how do we generate revenue for all the services that we want to provide? And again, there have been some great examples in the US where there's a wonderful example where they did in Los Angeles, where they had a massive, it's called Los Angeles 2030 or something, that's their massive public transport infrastructure plan. And in 1998, 2000 and 2008, the good citizens of Los Angeles voted for increases in their sales tax of 0.5 cent to fund the public transport infrastructure, and they've raised $40 billion a year. Wow. Isn't that amazing?
It is incredible.
And that's people voting to increase their own taxes.
I actually think we do really underestimate what people are prepared to do as long as you're straight with them about why you're doing it. And I think that the Queensland flood levy was an example of that. We're having the debate now about whether, Tony Abbott comes in and says no new taxes, and then Joe Hockey says, but we're just, it's not a tax, it's a levy. We're going to do this deficit reduction levy. Having come into government, having added more than $80 billion to the deficit, having given $9 billion unneeded and unasked for to the Reserve Bank, having done a deal with the Greens to remove the debt ceiling, having loaded up our debt, manufactured this budget emergency. They're now going to go to people, how about it, you're going to pay a levy now, when they opposed the Queensland flood levy. It is bizarre to me that you could see such a need, houses underwater, thousands, hundreds of thousands of people affected, and oppose a levy for that. And now with this manufactured budget emergency, be prepared to support one. Anyway, back onto state, back to the state politics, Verity. Labor was in government for a fair period of time last time, and a lot got done. But there's obviously, still things that need to be done to make New South Wales the best it can be. Do you have any particular things on your list of things that you'd like to see done?
I definitely think infrastructure is important. I think if you're living in a global city, to be honest, as beautiful as ours, you actually do want for, you know, top quality public transport that can move our citizens around cleanly and efficiently. And I think there is still a lot to do in Sydney when it comes to public transport infrastructure. I really want to see, I want to see the Labor Party, and it has in the past at a state level, embrace more fully the environment and climate change again. You know, Bob Carr has a great legacy on the environment. There's this wonderful story about...
And he'll be the first to tell you.
Yeah, he'll be the first. He'll probably write a book about it. But, you know, there was this wonderful story where one day Bob Debus, who was then the Environment Minister, gazetted more national parks in one day than the previous Liberal government had gazetted in their whole thing. Yeah. We were the first state, we were the first Western jurisdiction to introduce the greenhouse gas abatement scheme, which is an early carbon pricing thing. So there is a good history there, and it's such an important area, and there's so many things you could do. Sydney's already the financial hub. We could be the carbon trading hub of Asia. You know, there's so much new technology, new growth. It's so exciting, that area. I'd like to see us concentrate more on that. And I think I'd just like to, again, be able to talk about the revenue strategies to be able to properly fund our public services, because the thing about state government is at the end of the day, we are the deliverer of those services. You know, we need to make sure that we have enough DOCS caseworkers. You know, we need to make sure that we're properly funding our public education system and our health system, you know.
And you've talked a lot about education tonight. Yeah. What do you still think needs to be done in the education area?
Well, you know, I'll be bipartisan here. It has been good to see Pickley and O'Farrell stand up for the Gonski reforms, and that's good. But they've still cut $1.7 billion out of the education budget, and they've had 800 TAFE teacher jobs gone. TAFE is critical. It is the equity provider in Australian education. It is the second chance provider. There are so many stories of people who basically were able to go to TAFE, you know, and after they hadn't got their HSC, including my husband, you know, hadn't got his HSC, went to TAFE, and the rest is history, you know. TAFE is incredibly important, yet they're pretty much dismantling huge tracts of TAFE. So there's still a lot more to be done.
And why do you think you and the Labor Party are the right person and people to do that work?
Well, I'm feeling good about the Labor Party. I think this community pre-selection has been a real example of how we're getting serious about change, you know, and it's been lovely. I know this, you know, standing on street stalls and talking to people about bigger ideas than you normally talk about. And I think it's partly because it's not in the white, you know, noise of an election campaign. There's not the same aggression or conflict going on. So you're actually having genuine political conversations with people in the street about democracy and participation and, you know, pre-selection rules, you know. And it's been really affirming. And I think the more people that we allow into our party to be a part of the decision-making process, I think the more people that we allow to, you know, the information to make those decisions, the better it will be for the party, but the better it will be for politics more generally, the more sophisticated the conversation will be.
It kind of brings us back to where we started in a way, because it is true that you need to open the party up, democratise, increase membership, all of the things that, as I said, Bill's been talking about. But, you know, party reform's about more than just rules, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I remember reading a great thing about how to improve hospitals, and it was about I think the quote was culture eats rules for breakfast.
Yeah.
And the point really, it was something like that anyway. And the point was, you can have all the rules and rule changes in the world, unless you've actually got people who go beyond barely meeting the requirements of the rules, unless you've got people who want to do the best they can, not the bare minimum, then no rules in the world will be good enough to change culture and really deliver for the people that we are concerned to deliver for. So Can you talk a little bit about whether there are particular rules changes you'd like to see and whether there are particular cultural things that you'd like to see change in the Labor Party? Are there things that have bothered you about how we work with each other?
I think that the rules changes that are being mooted at the moment, particularly around greater rank and file participation in all of our pre-selection processes. So I think what we're doing in this trial, where we have both party members voting and the community voting, is brilliant and a really good first step, but we clearly need to open up rank and file participation, possibly even community participation in other pre-selections. So whether it be for the upper house or the Senate or for party administrative positions, all of that culture I think is a bit of a shake-up and is really positive, and we should do that. In terms of culture, but I think you're exactly right. Like, you can do a whole lot of rule changes, and there's a lot of people who we would not look to now, as example, politicians who still were elected in rank and file pre-selections and things. So you know what I mean? So it isn't just about the rules. I think, and this also I don't think is just about Labor, I think the thing that irritated me most when I was in Parliament was how little actual debate there was about ideas. Now, and that seems like a glib thing to say, but there wasn't I don't think there's enough respect for, which sounds ironic really, since you're in politics and it's all about these things, but there's not enough respect for difference of opinion. There's not enough, dare I say, politeness, you know, but just a genuine, healthy debate that isn't about whether or not you supported so-and-so for, you know, some cabinet position 4 years ago, but it's actually just about the idea in front of you.
Arguing things on the merits.
Arguing things on the merits.
And actually that creates in people, I think, sometimes an unwillingness to speak against the trend in the room. So you can shut down people's willingness to take a risk intellectually or to propose a creative solution. You really prop up groupthink when anytime someone has an idea that's slightly out of the straight and narrow, you shut them down. Now we've got another good question here. I've been trying to read the questions as well. This is from Anna. Another week, another New South Wales Premier. Is there something inherently corrupt about politics in New South Wales, and what can we do to change it?
And I mean, because I've been out talking to all these people in street stall, people have been making jokes about the rum core, and they're just saying, is it just us? Like, is it New South Wales? I mean, I think what can we do to change it? We can definitely do the various reforms that are happening at the moment in the Labor Party. You know, Liberals can do similar things. But I also think it's about strengthening the checks and balances in lots of ways. It's about strengthening civil society in a way. Like, you know, the famous maxim, power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Well, the way to prevent that from happening is if there are enough different forces that prevent, you know, and so I think ICAC has been incredibly important for political culture in New South Wales. I think that although it now just seems to be capturing people, it will lead to cultural change and has already, I would argue. I think that we need to make sure that we always have a frank and fearless public service providing frank and fearless advice, that we have an independent judiciary, you know, all that. I'm not suggesting it's not, but that.
And a free and diverse media.
Yeah, exactly. You know, that we actually have all the elements of a robust civil society. And I don't think there's something inherently corrupt about politics, but I do think that people, you know, that the power corrupting absolutely, you know. So it is just about keeping that all in check. And another thing is transparency. You know.
Absolutely.
And I think that there is now opportunity with new technology for greater transparency. And I think that's a good thing.
More real-time disclosure.
Yeah.
Great. So I think that we are pretty much done now, Verity. It's been terrific talking to you, and great to hear your views about ethical behaviour in politics, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you very much. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.